Hello, all you freedom-loving people. Welcome to another episode of Front Page. I'm your host, Scott Cameron Goulet. President Trump has been indicted again. It's no secret that every time there's news that is unfavorable to the Democrats, the DOJ responds by indicting President Trump. So who is the presiding judge of this case, and is the judge a fair one? President Trump's approval ratings are growing despite the ongoing legal proceedings. Even the mainstream media recognizes that it's inevitable that President Trump will be the Republican nominee. So what's the reason behind this? Ironically, Jack Smith accused President Trump of trying to destroy evidence, but Smith's team had to admit that it was they themselves who tried to hide the evidence. And some other good news is that in the Pennsylvania lawsuit, President Trump got justice. Fitch downgraded the rating of the United States. So what's the economic outlook for the U.S.? Okay, let's get into it. On Tuesday evening, President Trump was indicted again by a grand jury in Washington, D.C. over Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation into the January 6th incident. President Trump was indicted on 4 counts. One on conspiracy to defraud the U.S., one on conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, one obstruction and attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, and one of conspiracy against rights. The indictment was not a surprise since on Monday Joe Biden had been implicated in a long-running influence peddling scheme by his son Hunter's former business partner Devon Archer in Devon Archer's testimony before the House Oversight Committee. Right after the Devon Archer hearing, President Trump wrote on Truth Social that he is expecting an indictment from the January 6th investigation to come any day now. He wrote, "I assume that an indictment from deranged Jack Smith and his highly partisan gang of thugs pertaining to my peaceful and patriotic speech will be coming out any day now as yet another attempt to cover up all of the bad news about bribes, payoffs, and extortion coming from the Biden camp. This seems to be the way they do it. The situation is unfolding just as President Trump predicted. He was right about everything." President Trump's campaign released a statement to the media. They described that this indictment is nothing more than the latest corrupt chapter in the continued pathetic attempt by the Biden crime family and their weaponized Department of Justice to interfere with the 2024 presidential election. But why did they wait 2.5 years to bring these fake charges right in the middle of President Trump's winning campaign for 2024? Why was it announced the day after the big crooked Joe Biden scandal broke out from the halls of Congress? The answer is election interference. The lawlessness of these persecutions of President Trump and his supporters is reminiscent of Nazi Germany in the 1930s, the former Soviet Union, and other authoritarian dictatorial regimes. President Trump has always followed the law and the Constitution with advice from many highly accomplished attorneys. President Trump has been ordered to appear in federal court in Washington, D.C. at 4 p.m. on Thursday, August 3rd, in order to face the alleged charges in the new indictment. There are several unnamed, unindicted co-conspirators in the indictment as well. These are 4 attorneys, a Department of Justice official, and a political consultant who worked on President Trump's strategy. Some of the so-called co-conspirators who are mentioned in the new indictment can be identified from the information and the circumstances presented in the indictment. Co-conspirator 1 is an attorney who is aiding President Trump in contesting the 2020 presidential election results. It's almost certain that this is Rudy Giuliani, the former New York mayor, who is also a former attorney to President Trump. Co-conspirator number 2 is an attorney that argued that the vice president had the authority to reject or contest the electoral votes during their counting on January 6th. This is almost certainly John Eastman, who is a conservative lawyer and a former professor and dean at Chapman University School of Law. Co-conspirator number 3 is an attorney that advanced arguments about the involvement of voting machines in affecting the 2020 presidential election results. And this is almost certainly Sidney Powell, who is a former federal prosecutor and who later represented President Trump's former national security advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. Co-conspirator number 4 is a DOJ official who unsuccessfully tried to have the DOJ endorse President Trump's election contests. And this is almost certain to be Jeffrey Clark, who is a former DOJ civil attorney. Co-conspirator number 5 is someone who helped to devise and implement a plan for alternative slates of electors in states where President Trump contested the election results. This is most likely Kenneth Cheeseborough, who is an appellate lawyer that was invited by the Trump campaign to help litigate the election results in Wisconsin. But none of these people have been charged in the case so far. The district judge who is in charge of the January 6th case is Tanya Chutkin. She was appointed in June of 2014 by Barack Obama, and she also happens to be an Obama donor. She is also the only federal judge in Washington, D.C. who has sentenced January 6 defendants to sentences longer than the government had requested. In one of the cases, federal prosecutors sought to sentence Ohio residents Brandon Miller and Stephanie Miller to home confinement as part of their 36-month probation. The couple allegedly broke into the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Brandon Miller was live streaming their actions on Facebook at the time. But Chutkin's ruling was harsher than what the prosecutors had asked for. She sentenced Brandon Miller to 20 days in jail and Stephanie Miller to 14 days in jail. In the case of the Texas man Matt Mazzocco, the prosecutors recommended a 3-month sentence of home confinement and probation. But Chutkin again exceeded the prosecutor's recommended sentence. She claimed that there must be consequences for those who allegedly participated in an attempt to violently overthrow the institutions of the U.S. government. She ultimately sentenced Mazzocco to 45 days in jail plus 60 hours of community service. Chutkin has also ruled on one of President Trump's cases. President Trump filed a lawsuit in November of 2021 in an attempt to prevent the National Archives from transferring documents that were related to the January 6 incident to the House Select Committee that was investigating the incident. In her ruling, Chutkin rejected President Trump's request on the grounds that Joe Biden was the best suited to decide the issue of executive privilege. Despite numerous lawsuits and investigations, President Trump is rising in the polls. No one seems to be able to beat him or bring him down. John Feary, a veteran Republican, stated in an opinion piece in The Hill, for those who want to see the Republican Party move in a different direction, Sunday's New York Times poll was pretty depressing. The New York Times itself summed up its recent poll by saying Mr. Trump holds decisive advantages across almost every demographic group and region and in every ideological wing of the party. He leads by wide margins among men and women, younger and older voters, moderates and conservatives, those who went to college and those who didn't, and in cities, suburbs, and rural areas. So, how does President Trump gain the favor of voters so easily? Feary says that the following 4 factors could be the reason. Feary believes that, first and foremost, President Trump has experience of winning elections. He wrote, "This is Mr. Trump's 3rd campaign for president. There is really no substitute for that kind of experience, and Republican voters usually reward somebody who has run before." The second reason is that President Trump is very famous and the most famous Republican. Feary indicated that it takes a lot of time and money to become president worthy, and President Trump is already very famous. Almost everyone knows him whether they like him or not. Feary believes that President Trump's experience on the reality TV show The Apprentice helped him a lot in his 2016 campaign. The other Republican candidates can't place on par with President Trump in this regard. Feary pointed out that politicians have heard of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Senator Tim Scott, former Vice President Mike Pence, and former United Nations Ambassador Nikki Haley, but if you ask a passerby on the street who President Trump's vice president was, it's likely that very few people would know. Therefore, President Trump dominates the news cycle. This is the 3rd reason Feary identified. He said, because Trump is so famous, the mainstream news media is singularly fascinated with everything he does, says, or is indicted for. How can a challenger to Trump become as equally famous if the news only covers what Trump says and does? There's no way that any candidate can get any traction under the current media environment. There's one way Republican challengers can get media attention, and that's by attacking President Trump. But this method has apparently proven to be ineffective or counterproductive. Republican voters who hear the attacks on President Trump by other Republicans will perceive it as a violation of party loyalty. The most important reason is that President Trump had a pretty good record as president. Fury wrote, "Trump's ultimate trump card is his record in the White House. The economy was strong. Every racial and ethnic group had record employment. America was energy self-sufficient. Jobs and capital flowed back into the country because of his tax reform bill. On the international front, Russia had no reason to invade Ukraine. North Korea suspended its nuclear program, and peace agreements broke out in the Middle East." While those 4 years were not perfect, for most Republican voters, President Trump's performance was enough to guarantee his re-election. Special counsel Jack Smith's team in the case against President Trump made a stunning admission. They admitted in a new court filing that they made a false claim to the court. In a July 31st court filing, in its classified documents case against President Trump, Mr. Smith's team admitted that they did not turn over all the evidence to Mr. Trump's legal team as required by law, even though they had previously falsely claimed to have done so. Mr. Smith's team wrote in the latest filing, on July 27th, as part of the preparation for the superseding indictment coming later that day and the discovery production for defendant De Oliveira, the government learned that this footage had not been processed and uploaded to the platform established for the defense to view the subpoenaed footage. The government's representation at the July 18th hearing that all surveillance footage the government had obtained pre-indictment had been produced was therefore incorrect. The Epoch Times said Mr. Smith's team's admission carries a hint of irony as it accused Mr. Trump in a new superseding indictment filed on July 27th of conspiring with his staff to delete some security footage so that the grand jury in the case would not see all the evidence. And in other cases, President Trump is also getting positive results. A Pennsylvania judge dismissed part of a lawsuit that a state election employee brought against President Trump. A voting machine supervisor from Pennsylvania, James Savage, had filed lawsuits alleging that President Trump and his attorney, Rudy Giuliani, and others conspired to defame him and place him in a false light by publicly and falsely claiming that he tampered with the 2020 presidential election results. He also claimed that President Trump's comments about the 2020 election led him to being subjected to death threats and suffer 2 heart attacks. On July 31st, Judge Michael E. Erdos of the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas dismissed a part of Mr. Savage's claims. Judge Erdos said that the statements made by President Trump about election integrity were undoubtedly a matter of great public concern, and his remarks dealt with the cornerstone of our democracy. Speaking to the public on matters of public concern is part of a president's official duties. Indeed, the president's use of the bully pulpit to address the nation has historically been an important feature of the office. And determining Trump's mindset when he said what he said is not the role of the court. Neither is it the court's place to assess the wisdom of his comment. Other legal proceedings may examine the propriety of his statements and actions while he was the president, and whether, as the plaintiffs in this and other cases contend, it was this conduct which served as the actual threat to our democracy. But this case is not the proper place to do so. Here, Trump is entitled to presidential immunity. On August 1st, Fitch, one of the three major international rating agencies, downgraded the U.S. long-term foreign currency debt rating from AAA to AA+, with the outlook changing from negative to stable. This is Fitch's first time downgrading the U.S. since it first issued its U.S. credit rating in 1994. Fitch says that over the past 20 years, the level of governance in the U.S. has eroded, including on fiscal and debt issues. This is despite a bipartisan agreement in Congress in June to suspend the debt ceiling until January of 2025. Fitch expects the overall U.S. government deficit rate to rise from 3.7% in 2022 to 6.3% in 2023. In addition to the repeated debt limit, political standoffs, and the last-minute resolutions, the government lacks a medium-term fiscal framework unlike most peers and has a complex budgeting process. These factors, combined with several economic shocks and new spending programs, have led to successive increases in debt over the past decade. No further substantial fiscal consolidation measures are expected before the November 2024 election. As time moves on, lower credit ratings have the potential to raise the cost of borrowing for the U.S. government. However, the negative watch that the agency placed in May on America's rating was lifted and a stable outlook was assigned. Fitch also emphasized that there are still several structural strengths that underpin the U.S. rating. These include its large, sophisticated, diversified, and high-income economy, as well as its dynamic business environment. Crucially, the U.S. dollar is the world's most important reserve currency, which grants the government extraordinary financing flexibility. Fitch's move caused quite a stir. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said in a statement, "We strongly disagree with this decision." Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen called Fitch's decision outdated. She said, "The change by Fitch Ratings announced today is arbitrary and based on outdated data." Maya McGuinness, the president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, said, "The United States economy remains strong, but we are on an unsustainable trajectory. Today's downgrade should be a wake-up call. We need to get our country's fiscal and political house in order." Okay, this is our show for today. But before we go, I want to remind you that tomorrow we'll have our show on Front Page International. For those of you who don't know, we also have a YouTube channel called Front Page International. So tomorrow we'll have our show there at our regular time on YouTube at Front Page International. We'll be covering the latest American and international news, so please make sure to join us for that episode as well. I look forward to seeing you in the live chat. Okay, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard today, please don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends and family, because everybody deserves to know the truth. Again, thank you for watching Front Page, and we will see you again.